Hello and welcome to another update on the Ukraine war, and we'll be starting in the Kherson counteroffensive. So starting in the southwestern region of the Kherson counteroffensive, we see that the Ukrainians are trying to fight and break through the Russian defenses around Pravdina, as well as Barvinok, Zelenyihai, Ternovi Podi, as well as Nyubu and there's also shelling ongoing around Blahodatne. Generally speaking, the Ukrainians are attempting to break through the first line of defense here around the Kherson region. Further up north, we see that the Ukrainians are trying to push around these two villages to the west, Mala Seydeminucha, plus Novodeheredine. So these villages are on the side which will increase the bridgehead of the Ukrainian forces, but they're also engaging in fighting around Bushkinsky as well as Borosenske, which the situation completely changed since the last time I updated this. And similar to my update, the Ukrainians attempted to break through here in the south and then push eastwards from the western area, while still trying to hold and pin the Russian defenders here in the north. However, the Russians decided to completely fall back from their defensive lines until the second line of defense, preventing a encirclement of the Russian forces. However, the Ukrainians managed to capture this whole area in the north. So the Ukrainians managed to get a lot of territory, but there was no encirclements. At the very least, I haven't seen any reports of such. I did see some videos the day before the Ukrainians managed to take this whole area that the VDV soldiers of the Russian Federation were falling back from this area all the way to this new front line already the day before the Ukrainians managed to take the area. Generally speaking, the Russians decided to fall back, which allowed the Ukrainians to quickly take over after their breakthrough here in the east, which allowed the Ukrainians to take advantage of the situation and push westwards, threatening the Russian defenses in the north. So the Ukrainians are now fighting in this shortened front line, which actually, according to Rybar, leaves up a lot of Ukrainian forces to focus elsewhere. So according to Rybar, the Russian pro-Russian news media, they say that the Ukrainians are actually pulling troops northwards towards the Kreminna direction, which generally means that they are trying to relocate these forces elsewhere, possibly to Zaporizhia or Dnipro, to focus on the eastern front and reinforce those there, as the Ukrainians still heavily outnumber the Russians on the Kherson front line. Updates on the Oskil and Kreminna front. The Ukrainians have managed to start offensives here around Nevsky, as well as Makivka, which is actually inside the Luhansk Oblast, and they have captured Kharkivka, which is another village inside the Luhansk Oblast. So the Ukrainians are now in a position where they are actually fighting inside the Luhansk Oblast here in the north, and they have entered the region. Other than that, the Russians have set up a new defensive line around Nevsky and Makivka, which goes all the way to the north. This line here, Kovalivka, Novodian as well. And they have actually left most of these areas here to the west. And they have set up this defensive line because it allows them to actually protect Svatove, because if they set up their defensive line around the highway, then that would jeopardize the forces and supplies that had to pass through this highway. Generally speaking, they are defending, setting up a defensive line here by this area, these villages to the west, as well as this highway here in the north, to prevent the Ukrainians from reaching Svatove and attacking their supply lines towards Kreminna and Svatove. Here in the south, the Ukrainians have actually managed to attack the villages here north of Kreminna towards Chervonopopivka, as well as Pishane and Shutelivka, which means that they are actually trying to cut off this supply line between Kreminna and the northern area to try and force the Russians to fall back further, similar to what we've seen in the previous counteroffensives done by the Ukrainians. And finally, here around the Kupiansk front, there has been no changes since my last update. The Ukrainians are still fighting here, trying to advance down the highway as well as towards Ivanivka, which is the first village here, the next Russian defensive line by the Svatove direction. And here south of Zenkove, the Ukrainians have managed to capture 5 more villages, trying to connect a bridgehead from the east of the Oskil River with Sinkove and allowing them to cross through and create a large bridgehead from the south towards the north, and allowing the Ukrainians to completely ignore this Oskil River as they have completely passed. That's it for this update. Thanks for watching and have a great